which creates a synergetic movement in the economy, is manufacturing. We have to deliberately grow our manufacturing sector to secure jobs for the young people of Kenya. And in this respect, you cannot talk about manufacturing without talking about the cost of power. And that is why, in terms of manufacturing, the proposals I have come with are domiciled, number one, around getting power adequate in Kenya, but also cheap. One is that we have to totally liberalize power sector. And the kind of lip service you are hearing from government is not enough. Liberalization has to happen. If an industry can produce their power to use, and they have access to sell, they must be at liberty to sell it to the next factory, so that we have as many producers of energy as possible, because abundance brings forth lower prices. The second thing, in terms of bringing the cost of power down in Kenya, we have an institution called KenGen, majority owned by the people of Kenya through the government. The current valuation of KenGen is around 75 billion Kenya shillings. Yet it is a company that produces roughly 2,000 megawatts of power. An equivalent of KenGen in other economies is valued more than 450 billion Kenya shillings. Just to cite like two: Transport Power in Nigeria, Geregu Power in Nigeria. Currently there is a transaction ongoing in Philippines, a country called EDC, producing less than KenGen, yet the valuation is $5 billion US. What am I proposing? That immediately, and I'm talking about early 2028, we must leverage the $500 billion assets of KenGen. The government must advertise internationally and sell 35% of KenGen into a partner that knows much more about power, so that we fetch close to 150 billion Kenya shillings, and that money will go directly into producing more energy. The more we produce, the cheaper it will become. On manufacturing, the issue again of manufacturing policy, I am just trying to be brief. I have done a lot of research on the things I'm talking about, so I'm just giving top lines. Vitu tu zile summary. Manufacturing policy. Nimeweza kuangalia nchi kama South Korea iliweza kukua namna gani, nchi kama China from 1978, na nikaona ya kwamba nchi huwa haiachiliwi tu ijipeleke. Lazima serikali inaangazia ni wapi tunataka nchi iendelee, na katika hiyo manufacturing huwa inaongozwa na kitu inaitwa manufacturing policy, and we've been able to check the kind of items that Kenya can tap into so that we can grow our manufacturing sector at a much faster pace than we are doing now. The other issue, you allow me just to go top line and summary, around jobs. All these points now I am giving are all about jobs. The other second point around jobs is hospitality and tourism. Currently, Kenya last year had maybe around 2.7 million international visitors. A country of 58 million Kenyans, abundantly blessed, well positioned. I have looked at cases, for example, Morocco, a much smaller country than Kenya in terms of population. Even in terms of endowments, Kenya is much better. Morocco had 19 million visitors last year. Albania, a country with maybe a tenth of our population, they had 12 million visitors last year. Clearly there is something we can do so that we grow our tourism sector, diversifying what we offer, marketing Kenya better, and my target is that as a country we should be able to attract 10 million international visitors. What does that do? For every 3 million visitors, we create 1 million jobs. If we have 10 million visitors, we are talking about 3 million direct jobs. And every one direct job in hospitality and tourism creates 3 more jobs indirectly through agriculture, through transport, and the rest. It is clear that we can do more, attract more visitors into Kenya, and clearly create more than 3 million direct jobs for the great youth of Kenya who are watching us tonight. The other issue I want to highlight in terms of jobs again. All this I'm giving is about jobs because I've realized there is no way you can say you are growing an economy when many Kenyans qualified are idle. So allow me to highlight the issue of finance industry. Kenya has many banks, over 40. Whether big or small, they all make money. How then do we give an advantage to others that is in our country? My proposal is this way. Kenya must covertly frustrate the takeover of the Kenyan banks by international institutions. Covertly. Because this is a sector that clearly makes money. How do you give out a sector that makes money so easily? The second thing is that we must deliberately create an atmosphere where we can have big banks, Kenyan banks, competing regionally and continentally. Through our regulator, it is important that Kenya creates big behemoths, banks in Kenya that can compete continentally with banks like Standard Bank, like banks like Netbank. And this, I have done what should be done by the regulator, so that even as we grow competition in our finance industry, we also have big enough institutions that can compete across the continent, because this fetches Kenya money from other markets. Tuko pamoja? Allow me so that I am sequential, to highlight just briefly about agriculture. Agriculture currently is dominant in our economy when it comes to jobs. Many Kenyans in rural areas, precisely 70%, are employed in the agricultural sector, but the productivity is too low. Even with the fertilizer subsidy, Kenya is facing an imminent maize food shortage in the next 3 months. I can assure you, Kenya can only import maize to sustain ourselves in the next 3 months. Therefore, this shows whereas some policies can be enhanced and become better, we also need additional policies around agriculture. And just to give a few, when it comes to food crops like maize, beyond fertilizer, we need also to participate by availing to our farmers cheaper or even much more subsidized certified seed of maize. Because there is the issue of production, but there is also the issue of productivity. Hata ukipea fertilizer mbegu ambayo ni sio mzuri sana, fertilizer can only do so much. So that is one of the areas to grow productivity and production. But holistically, when it comes to cash crops like tea and coffee, na najua kuna wakulima wengi wanatutazama hapa leo, wako katika eneo mingi za Kenya. Kenya haifanyi enough kwa kusaidia wakulima wetu kuzalisha vizuri coffee and tea, na pia kwa wao kupata mapato mwafaka. Na kwa hayo, beyond the fertilizer which we must avail to Kenyans, we must also do much more. Kenyans are also asking for more affordable pesticides and other inputs within agriculture. The second thing is about marketing. Yes, we grow this tea and coffee, but we can look at where we can fetch better prices, what kind of products. We must deliberately, as a country, embrace speciality, so that as we grow our tea, na tukikuza kahawa yetu, tunakuza ile iko na bei ya juu sana katika bei za kidunia na soko ya duniani. And agriculture has a potential to raise productivity to the millions of farmers who are engaged in it. Muniruhusu niende nikimaliza. Na nikiongea kwa sauti munisamehe, hii ni kitu ambayo imeumiza roho yangu sana. Because I think our country can do more, but there are some chokes and there are some bottlenecks that we have to deal with. Utaniruhusu niende kwa vitu zingine, sio sasa za kazi. Na so that I'm sequential. Hizi vitu nimezifanya mwenyewe, lakini ningetaka naangalia ndio tusiache ile muhimu. Ukiangalia Kenya, na mimi nimepata nafasi na tazama na angalia kwa undani. Ile shida inakuba Kenya kwa sasa ya juu zaidi ni integrity of leaders, corruption and governance. Dear Kenya,